Good morning. Can you hear me? Yes. I'm selling it. Well, let's see. A few days ago, Mexico's foreign minister gave an interview to the Spanish newspaper El País. In bold letters, the headline was as follows: "Sovereignty is the first thing that must always be defended." And I agree. In fact, that's why I came. To accompany my friends Ricardo and Ninfa at Grupo Salinas' most important annual event. To talk with you, the true protagonists of this day. But above all, for a political and moral task that I consider essential. I come to defend the sovereignty of the Mexican people. The sovereignty of the Mexican people against their true enemies, which are not exactly the ones pointed out by the government of Mexico. They are not in foreign capitals, but within the country, and they advance relentlessly. There are three. Let's unmask them, to fight them and defeat them. But first, a preamble. The word sovereignty is in vogue in Mexico today. Actually, it always has been. Mexico is a proud country with a big flag. I don't know if you know this, actually. Here's an anecdote. The flag in Plaza de Colón in Madrid, the biggest one in Spain, was born here. During a visit to Mexico as president, José María Aznar saw the flag in the Zócalo and said, "I want one just like that, or even bigger." Mexico inspires pride even in others. It won its sovereignty during independence. It defended it against foreign invasions, and even turned it into a doctrine, the Estrada Doctrine. Some circumstances are added to this deep and rooted national sentiment. Mexico knows what it means to have a neighbor who throws its weight around. And it also knows what it means to be looked down upon. I'm not referring to a colonialist case. Mexico was never a colony. It was a viceroyalty, complex, mixed, and dazzling. I'm referring to a hypocritical perspective. It's amazing. Even today, many left-wing Europeans want for Mexico what they would never want for themselves. A communist revolution, a one-party regime, a perfect dictatorship. I call them utopia tourists, although in reality we should call them racists. Our beloved Mario Vargas Llosa said it about 40 years ago or so, in a famous debate with the German writer Günter Grass. His critique remains relevant. There is no subtler or more perverse form of racism than advocating for Latin America the very thing you would never accept for your own country. As if freedom or security were luxuries reserved for Europeans. As if Venezuelans, Cubans, or Mexicans weren't ready for a fully democratic order. What do I want for Spain? Freedom, security, physical and legal, separation of powers, political pluralism, full democracy. So what do I want for Mexico? Exactly the same. And that's why I ask you, what remains of Mexican national sovereignty when millions of citizens have lost sovereignty over their own lives? In the face of drug trafficking, in the face of political power, amid economic dependence. Sovereignty is not a flag. It's not an inflammatory speech against foreigners. It's not a historical criticism made at a morning press conference. Sovereignty starts with something even more basic. Being able to go out on the street without having to ask a criminal for permission. Being able to open a business without paying extortion money. Being able to publish the truth without calculating its cost in blood. Being able to vote without someone having already decided the result in a windowless office. A country isn't sovereign just because no one invades it. It also has to prevent other powers from hollowing it out from within. I'll say it with the clarity that characterizes me, and that so often gets me into trouble. The ones who threaten Mexican sovereignty are not the United States, not Spain, and certainly not history, Hernán Cortés, or Isabella the Catholic. What threatens the sovereignty of Mexicans are three internal and corrosive phenomena, or scourges. One, organized crime. Two, authoritarian populism. And three, the mentality of dependence. Let's examine them one by one, without fear, with the courage we praise in true patriots. First, organized crime. In Teotitlan, Jalisco, just over a year ago, what the media called the Ranch of Horror came to light. Hundreds of shoes, backpacks, clothes, human remains, ashes. A place where organized crime-trained recruits tortured those who resisted and got rid of the bodies. Many young people ended up there after responding to job offers on social media. They were looking for a job. They found a criminal compound. They were looking for an opportunity, and they found a trap. An empty pair of shoes is not a statistic. They are an accusation. An accusation against those who govern a country where such barbarity is possible, where the corpses pile up, where the mass grave stops being news because its frequency has turned it into part of the landscape. Mexico now has more than 134,000 missing people. It has tens of thousands of unidentified bodies in forensic morgues. There are mothers searching for human remains in vacant lots because they got tired of waiting for a government that never comes. Because it can't or because it doesn't want to. I've seen the videos, the photographs of those mothers. A rod in one hand, a shovel in the other, on their knees in a vacant lot, searching for their child beneath the earth, the soil of their homeland. I can't think of a more accurate image of a broken sovereignty. And what about the dead? Over 200,000 murdered in the last 6-year term. Most of them young people, both victims and perpetrators. Organized crime offers them what the state denies them: income, belonging, purpose. In exchange, a short life. The cartels recruit around 350 people per week. Not because they are irresistible, but because they compete against an absent state and sometimes something worse, a complicit state. Mexico does not have a public security problem in the conventional sense. It has a sovereignty problem, a very serious one. Max Weber defined the modern state as the institution that holds the legitimate monopoly on the use of force. The phrase is often quoted, but rarely thought about. Monopoly, legitimate, force. When the state loses that monopoly, there is no vacuum. Another power appears. A power that collects taxes, though it's called extortion. A power that sets rules without publishing laws, recruits youth without employment offices, and controls territories without running in elections. That decides who can campaign and even who has the right to live in order to hold office. I'm thinking now of Carlos Manso, Mayor Carlos Manso, and of the 37 candidates who were killed during the last election cycle. 37 candidates killed. Not in the Wild West. Not in a dictatorship, in a democracy. Or so they call it. What popular sovereignty exists when a candidate needs permission from a cartel to campaign? What citizenship is possible when a family knows that reporting is more dangerous than staying silent? What kind of republic is it if the state avoids Michoacán, Guerrero, and Tamaulipas, and cartels collect taxes? That's why it's so obscene. I have no other word for it. To reduce sovereignty to just a verbal excuse against foreigners. They demand historical apologies for grievances from 500 years ago, while thousands and thousands of Mexicans are still waiting for justice for crimes committed 5 days, 5 months, or 5 years ago. They invoke Cuauhtémoc, while Ayotzinapa mothers have spent over 10 years without a credible official truce. They ask for apologies for the conquest, while in Jalisco mass graves keep appearing, so many and so often that they're no longer news. Forgiveness is neither collective nor retroactive. So less historical theatrics and more contemporary responsibility. Defending sovereignty means preventing drug traffickers from taking over your territory, your institutions, your state. Defending sovereignty means fighting organized crime, not making deals with them, and certainly not surrendering to them. I will speak, as I say clearly, out of respect for my Mexican brothers and sisters. A president who invokes sovereignty every day should start by guaranteeing it to those who have lost the most basic form of sovereignty. The freedom to travel their country, the right to bury their dead, the right to know what happened to their children. President Sheinbaum insists on demanding that Spain apologize. But first, she should apologize to the mothers searching for missing relatives. Two, authoritarian populism. Authoritarianism, plain and simple. The second enemy of sovereignty is harder to detect. It doesn't leave open graves or empty shoes. It works with decrees, parliamentary majorities, and constitutional trappings. And many times, pay attention to this, in alliance with the very same criminals I just mentioned. The capture of the Mexican state, its loss of sovereignty doesn't come from just one front. It comes from two fronts that merge into one. On one hand, the cartels occupy territory, buy off people, and impose their own law. On the other hand, authoritarian populism dismantles the institutions that could stop them, eliminates the checks and balances that could control them, and destroys the arbiters who could judge them. Together, the enemies of sovereignty become stronger. The drug trade needs impunity. Populism needs funding and protection. The merger has a name. Narco-State, the exact opposite of a sovereign citizen. Where a narco-governor rules, there are no free citizens. Where there is a narco-president, there is no republic. Where crime and power become indistinguishable, the citizen becomes a subject, if not a hostage. This is now the greatest threat to the sovereignty of Mexicans. It doesn't come from outside. No foreign government, Marines, or intelligence services are involved. It's imposed by those who claim to govern in the name of the people, but they do it for their own benefit or for the benefit of powerful groups that no one controls. I mentioned it the first time I spoke at this university, a bastion of knowledge and freedom. Democracy is not just about voting. The ballot boxes give a mandate, not a license to do whatever you want. Winning the elections does not give you the right to take everything. The Congress, the judges, the referees, the regulators, public information, or the official truth. Mexico knows that system well. It suffered from it for decades. The initials have changed, but it's important to recognize the profile, the silhouette. The great Octavio Paz called it the philanthropic ogre. Vargas Llosa, the perfect dictatorship. That state that oversees, protects, grants, embraces, that gradually occupies all the vital space of society in order to subdue it. The ogre doesn't roar, it speaks in a low voice with a certain metallic cadence. That is its effectiveness and its danger. First, it subdues the Electoral Institute and Tribunal. Then they turned an electoral majority into a constitutional majority that the citizens had never expressly granted them. With it, they captured the judiciary, the last great counterbalance to power. And they continued with the rest. Economic competition, telecommunications, transparency, data protection, human rights. One institution after another. Methodically, without fuss, without any apparent breaks. That's how what I once called the Trojan donkeys of democracy advances, with slow but steady steps. There's a difference between reforming an institution and subjugating it. Judicial independence doesn't exist to protect judges, but to protect citizens from power. Without independent judges, the citizen is not sovereign. Without autonomous bodies, they are left completely defenseless. I followed the process closely and with great concern. In Spain, they want to do the same. In June 2025, Mexico held a judicial election to fill 2,600 posts. 13% of the electorate participated. Among those elected was even a former lawyer of El Chapo. And they call this democratizing justice? We should congratulate them for their honesty. Never before had the fox been elected by vote to take care of the chickens. Without a coup d'etat, without tanks in the streets, Mexican democracy has been emptied. The name remains, the facade remains, but the substance disappears. Freedom House places Mexico at 58 points out of 100. It says partially free. That is only partially sovereign. Yes, the Mexicans are being robbed of their sovereignty. Not a foreign power, I insist, but the collusion of crime and authoritarian populism. And this affects everyone. Everyone in every way. To the girl who sews balls in San Simón, Zahuatlán. And to the nation's top businessmen, because institutional degradation doesn't stay in the courts, it always reaches business and your wallet. The major rating agencies have sounded the alarm about Mexico, not on a whim. Because growth is weak, because it spends badly, and because it no longer inspires confidence. The markets are not ideologues. They are rational cowards. When they get scared, it's worth asking what they've seen that the official propaganda is hiding. I'm telling you, they've seen the philanthropic ogre. The philanthropic ogre is back. The same clause as always, but now with the face of a woman. And number 3, the dependency mentality. The third threat to the sovereignty of Mexicans is the quietest one. And maybe that's why it's the most dangerous. I'm not talking about legitimate help for those who need it. A civilized society supports the vulnerable. That's not up for discussion. The discussion is about something else. A social policy can lift a person up or keep them down. It can make citizens freer or voters more captive. That is the moral difference between a liberal social policy and a populist social policy. The first one looks at the citizens standing tall. The second one prefers them on their knees. The populist pretends to be a fairy godmother, as I said before, but is actually a godfather. Like Vito Corleone, he gives you something now, so you'll owe him everything tomorrow. And that's where another form of loss appears, a loss of sovereignty. Not the sovereignty of the state, but the sovereignty of individuals, of people. A citizen ceases to be fully in control of their destiny when their life prospects depend on the will of those in power. When personal effort is no longer the main way to get ahead and is replaced by the expectation of aid, a subsidy, or a transfer. Helping the vulnerable, as I have said, is a moral obligation, but turning dependence into a social model is a form of domination. Because in addition, a citizen who depends on those in power has more difficulty standing up to power, disagreeing with power, or saying no to power. And the ability to say no to power is the very essence of sovereignty. Tocqueville warned about this almost 2 centuries ago. There is a kind of servitude that doesn't need chains. A tutelary power that offers to guide people as long as they agree not to guide themselves. It doesn't crush, it accustoms. Once again, the philanthropic ogre. Mexico has reduced poverty in recent years, that's true. A serious speech doesn't just select the data that suits it, but the important questions come afterwards. At what economic, institutional, and moral cost? With more productivity or with more transfers? With more formal employment or with more clientele? With more capabilities or with more dependence? The Mexican economy is stagnant. It grows far below its potential, and you know that better than anyone. A business person doesn't invest just because there are tax incentives. They invest when they have confidence, when the rules are enforced, when a contract means what it says, when a judge doesn't look to those in power before passing judgment. A young person doesn't start a business just from enthusiasm. They start a business when they feel that their effort makes sense, that merit exists, that not everything depends on who you know or who you pay. I've said it many times, yes. Populism is bread for today and hunger for tomorrow. And when hunger comes, it doesn't distinguish between those who voted for it and those who didn't. Yes? I have come to defend the sovereignty of the Mexican people with affection, with concern, but also with hope. Mexico has impressive assets, an enviable geographic position, a formidable industrial base, an immense youth population, a historic opportunity to diversify ties with Europe, and a powerful business culture, as this very room demonstrates. The question isn't whether Mexico has power, because it does. The question is who wields it and for what purpose. And here I want to address all of you directly. I'm not here to flatter you. I'm here to challenge you. A part of the economic elites in Latin America has made the same mistake too many times. They believe they can protect their private interests while the public structure, that is, the state or democracy, falls apart. They believe it's enough to adapt, negotiate, wait, survive another 6-year term, and cross their fingers. And let those who pray, pray. It's a fantasy and it's frivolous. Democratic erosion is relentless. It first reaches the judge, then the regulator, then the contract, then credit, then investment, then property, and finally the company, freedom and the progress of everyone. No income statement can withstand the destruction of the rule of law. There is no economic health without democratic health. I say it with more conviction than ever. What is moral is what is effective. Defending independent judges is not legal romanticism. It's defending the material conditions for prosperity. Defending a free press is not a liberal whim. It's defending the information system without which no market works. Defending legal certainty is not a corporate demand. It's defending the trust without which no investment is possible. A business person who remains silent in the face of institutional destruction may buy time, but loses the country. And losing the country is the worst business there is, a guaranteed ruin. Therefore, don't be afraid, don't hide, don't sit on the fence, don't confuse prudence with passivity. Raise your voice when it's time to raise it, which is now. I'm coming back. I'm going back to the beginning. Sovereignty. It's a beautiful word, but it's wise to be wary of governments that use grand national words to avoid the big national questions. Sovereignty cannot be a screen to hide the disappeared, to cover up economic data, or to turn any criticism into interference. A mature nation does not fear criticism. Only insecure governments confuse disagreement with an attack on the homeland. Mexico is not defended by denying its problems, but by facing them. I know that a Spanish woman talking about Mexico and Mexico's sovereignty might be a bit uncomfortable for some people. I get that, but I know something else too. I come from a country that also knows about institutional deterioration, the sectarian use of history, the capture of language, the colonization of the state, and the populist temptation. And that's why I speak. Not from a place of superiority, but from experience and from affection. The history between Mexico and Spain is too complex, too fruitful, and too intimate to leave it in the hands of propaganda. We are not hereditary enemies. We are part of a long, difficult, mixed, conflict-ridden, and creative conversation. Reducing it to grievance is to impoverish it, and it's also a form of distraction. While the past is being debated with Spain, crime is taking over the present. While forgiveness is being demanded for the conquest, thousands of Mexicans are demanding to find their children. While sovereignty is invoked against foreign powers, too many citizens lose it to domestic power centers. The main Mexican question isn't about sovereignty from Spain. That was settled 2 centuries ago. The big question is whether Mexicans will be free from fear, abuse, and dependence. That's where the future is at stake. The independence of Mexico was a national feat. The reform was a liberal feat. Democratization was a civic feat. The next Mexican feat has already been marked: to reclaim the sovereignty of the Mexican people. So no young person must choose between emigrating, dependency, or crime. so that no business owner has to pay criminals in order to work, so that no journalist has to weigh whether a truth is worth a bullet, so no judge must consult the powerful before passing judgment, so that no mother has to search alone for her child underground. That is sovereignty. Not sovereignty as a slogan, nor as an offense, nor as a pretext for power. Sovereignty as a dignified life, as law, as security, as personal independence, as the ability to say no. And for that, Mexico needs one more thing. Very important, decisive. An alternative. A political alternative equal to its historic challenge. Nympha explained it brilliantly in her speech. There are crucial elections next year and a decisive period ahead, historic. Mexico doesn't need anyone to appeal to its pride as a nation because it already has it. What it needs is to direct that pride toward the most difficult task, the demand on oneself. Because there is no higher form of patriotism than fighting the degradation of one's own homeland. The choice is very simple. Sovereignty or organized crime. Sovereignty or authoritarian populism. Sovereignty or dependence. Sovereignty or narco-state. Sovereignty or... Add the initials yourselves. Or the first and last name. We all know. Which ones are they? I end where I started, in Jalisco, with those empty shoes. Who were those young people? What did they aspire to? And who failed them? Did the state that never arrived fail them? Did the economy not employ them? Did politics not represent them? And also, yes, they failed themselves too, because individual responsibility exists and it's the foundation of freedom. Those shoes are an accusation, but they're also a question. What will we do? The Mexico that defends its sovereignty already exists. It is dispersed, disorganized, not always represented, but it exists. It is in millions of ordinary citizens who fulfill their duty every day without expecting privileges or excuses. It is in the culture of responsibility. And when a nation preserves its moral energy, it can still correct its course. And Mexico can correct its course. I have a motto that's guided me for years, and I'll end with it. I won't be the one who falls short. I say it to my daughters, to my friends, to my allies, and I want to say it here today as well. Let it not be because of you either. Be brave, be demanding, be sovereign in the deepest sense of the word. True masters of your destiny, that is to say Mexicans. Thank you very much.